They say success leaves clues, but sometimes the most powerful clues are hidden in the most ordinary moments. Chen thought he was just fixing a laptop that Tuesday morning. He had no idea he was about to repair something much more valuable, a woman's faith in the impossible. But before we dive into this story of unexpected connections, second chances, and the magic that happens when two broken worlds collide, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning fog rolled off Lake Michigan like a gray blanket being pulled from the city's shoulders. Chicago was waking up slowly, reluctantly, the way it always did in late October, when the warmth of summer had become nothing more than a memory, and winter's promise hung in the air like an unwelcome guest who'd arrived too early to the party. Chen stood at the window of his cramped apartment, watching the world come alive 6 stories below. His reflection stared back at him. A man of 34, with kind eyes that had seen too much disappointment, hands that knew the difference between fixing things and breaking them, and a face that carried the weight of responsibilities he'd never asked for, but accepted without question. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft breathing coming from the small bedroom where his 8-year-old daughter Emma still slept. Her dark hair spread across a pillow decorated with planets and stars. He moved carefully through the morning routine, each step choreographed by necessity and perfected by repetition. Coffee first, black and strong, made from beans that cost too much, but reminded him of better days. Then breakfast, oatmeal with honey and cinnamon, the kind Emma actually ate without complaint. While the oats cooked, he packed her lunch, making sure to include the apple slices cut into perfect stars, just the way she liked them, and a note written on whatever scrap of paper he could find. Today's note, scribbled on the back of an electric bill, read, "Remember, Em, you're braver than you believe and stronger than you seem. Love, Dad." The kitchen was small, but organized with military precision. Every tool, every appliance, every dish had its place. Marcus had learned long ago that control over the small things was sometimes the only control a person could maintain when the big things spiraled beyond reach. On the counter, his laptop bag sat open, revealing an array of precision screwdrivers, thermal paste, diagnostic cables, and other tools of his trade. Next to it, Emma's backpack waited with equal readiness. Homework completed, permission slips signed. Everything a responsible father should manage. Emma emerged from her bedroom like a sleepy bear, her hair pointing in every direction except down. She wore mismatched socks, one with robots, another with unicorns, and an oversized t-shirt that had once belonged to her mother. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the way he always did when something reminded him of Sarah. 3 years had passed since the accident, but grief, he'd learned, didn't follow calendars or healing timelines. It came and went like an unwelcome tide, sometimes gentle, sometimes crushing. "Morning, sunshine," Marcus said, ruffling Emma's hair as she climbed onto the kitchen stool. "Sleep well?" Emma yawned and nodded, then peered suspiciously at the oatmeal. "Did you put the good cinnamon in it? The expensive kind that makes our budget cry?" "Absolutely." She giggled, and the sound filled the small apartment with something bright and necessary. Emma had her mother's laugh, infectious and musical, but her father's pragmatic nature. At 8, she already understood concepts like grocery money and tight months in ways that children shouldn't have to. But she faced these realities with a resilience that both amazed and broke Marcus's heart. "What's on the agenda today, kiddo?" Marcus asked, settling onto the stool beside her with his own bowl. "Math test, which I'm totally going to ace because I'm basically a genius at fractions now. Art class where Mrs. Peterson is letting us paint whatever we want, and lunch with Zoe where we're going to plan our Halloween costumes." Emma paused between spoonfuls. "What about you, Dad? Any interesting computers to save today? Marcus smiled at her phrasing. Emma had started calling his repair work saving computers when she was 6, after she'd watched him resurrect an old desktop that everyone else had declared dead. To her, he wasn't just fixing machines, he was bringing them back to life, giving them second chances. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. A few house calls this morning, then I might stop by the cafe downtown. That new client with the networking issues wants to meet in person. The fancy one, with the expensive coffee. That's the one. Emma wrinkled her nose. Why don't they just come here? Your workshop is way cooler. Marcus looked around their small apartment. His workshop consisted of a card table in the corner of the living room, covered with computer parts and surrounded by plastic storage bins filled with cables and components. It was functional but hardly impressive, especially compared to the sleek corporate offices where most of his clients worked. Sometimes, people like to meet on neutral ground. It makes them feel more comfortable. But you're not scary. Dad, you fix things, you make them better. The simple confidence in her voice hit him harder than it should have. Emma saw him as a man who made things better, who brought order to chaos, who solved problems with patience and skill. If only he could fix the bigger problems in their lives with the same certainty he brought to damaged motherboards and corrupted hard drives. After breakfast, they walked the 6 blocks to Emma's school together, a routine they both treasured. The morning air was crisp and carried the scent of fallen leaves and someone's fireplace. Emma chatted about her upcoming Halloween costume, a scientist this year, complete with safety goggles and a lab coat her father had found at a thrift store, while Marcus listened and offered appropriate enthusiasm. The school building loomed ahead, red brick and tall windows, filled with the sounds of children and the promise of learning. Marcus watched Emma join her friends at the entrance. Her transition from his daughter to student seamless and natural. She turned and waved before disappearing inside, and he felt the familiar mixture of pride and loneliness that came with sending her into a world he couldn't control or protect. Walking back alone, Marcus let his mind drift to the day ahead. 3 house calls scheduled, all routine maintenance that would barely cover their expenses for the week. Then the afternoon meeting at Grind Coffee, downtown Chicago's attempt at sophisticated cafe culture, where he was supposed to meet with someone from Morrison Digital about their network security concerns. The client had been vague over email, mentioning only that they needed discreet consultation on sensitive matters and were willing to pay premium rates for the right expertise. Marcus had learned not to ask too many questions up front. In his line of work, discretion was often more valuable than technical skill. He'd built his reputation on 2 simple principles. He could fix almost anything, and he never talked about what he found while fixing it. This combination had earned him a steady stream of clients who needed problems solved without complications or publicity. His apartment felt different when Emma wasn't there, larger and smaller at the same time. He moved through his morning. Preparations methodically. Shower, shave, clothes that looked professional but comfortable. His reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man who'd learned to carry responsibility gracefully, even when it felt too heavy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The grey at his temples had arrived early, a souvenir from 3 years of single parenthood and financial uncertainty. But his hands remained steady and his eyes clear. The laptop bag came with him everywhere, a battered leather messenger bag that had been a gift from Sarah during their 2nd year of marriage. Inside, his tools were arranged with surgical precision, each instrument designed for a specific purpose, each cable tested and proven reliable. His laptop, a custom-built machine that could handle everything from basic diagnostics to complex network analysis, hummed quietly in its padded compartment. The first house call took him to Lincoln Park, where an elderly professor needed help. transferring 40 years of research from a dying desktop to a new system. Dr. Rothstein greeted Marcus at the door with the grateful smile of someone who'd been expecting disaster and found salvation instead. "Mr. Chen, thank goodness you're here. I was up all night worrying about my manuscript files." Marcus spent 2 hours in the professor's cluttered study, carefully migrating decades of academic work while Dr. Rothstein hovered nearby, offering coffee and nervous commentary. The old desktop wheezed and complained, its hard drive making sounds that suggested imminent failure, but Marcus coaxed it through one final performance. File by file, chapter by chapter, a lifetime of scholarship found new life on modern hardware. "Remarkable," Dr. Rothstein murmured as the last file transferred successfully. "You've just saved 40 years of work." "Just doing my job, sir." "No, young man, you've done much more than that. You've preserved something that matters." The second call was routine. A small business owner whose point-of-sale system had decided to stop communicating with his inventory database. 20 minutes of cable checking and driver updates restored order to his world. The third was even simpler. A teenager whose gaming computer had been running weird since he'd tried to install some questionable software. Marcus removed the malware, updated the security protocols, and left the boy with stern warnings about internet safety. By noon, Marcus found himself walking through downtown Chicago's Loop District, navigating the canyon of steel and glass that housed the city's financial heart. The streets hummed with purpose and ambition, filled with people who walked fast and talked faster, their voices blending into the urban symphony of car horns, construction noise, and the distant rumble of elevated trains. Grind Coffee occupied the ground floor of a sleek tower that reached toward low-hanging clouds. Through the large windows, Marcus could see the carefully curated interior, exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable. The clientele appeared to match the aesthetic, well-dressed professionals, hunched over laptops, nursing artisanal beverages while participating in the elaborate dance of looking important and busy. Marcus paused outside, checking his phone for any additional details about this mysterious meeting. The original email had come from an account registered to V. Morrison, with a corporate signature indicating Morrison Digital, but no additional information about the nature of their business or the specific problem they needed solved. The only concrete detail was a description. Look for the woman with red hair at the corner table, probably surrounded by more technology than is reasonable for one person. He pushed through the heavy glass door, immediately enveloped by the rich aroma of expensive coffee and the quiet hum of productivity. The interior was exactly as sterile and sophisticated as it appeared from outside. All clean lines and muted colors designed to make its patrons feel important and successful. Marcus scanned the room until he found her. She sat alone at a table in the far corner, and the description had been accurate. She was indeed surrounded by an unreasonable amount of technology. A sleek laptop occupied the center of the small table, flanked by a tablet, 2 smartphones, and what appeared to be a portable hard drive. Cables snaked between the devices like technological ivy, and she stared at the laptop screen with an expression that suggested the machine had personally offended her. Victoria Morrison, though Marcus didn't know her name yet, was exactly the kind of person who belonged in a place like Grind Coffee. Her red hair was pulled back in a style that managed to look both professional and effortless, and she wore a black blazer that probably cost more than Marcus made in a good month. Even from across the room, he could sense the invisible force, field of authority that surrounded successful people, the kind of presence that made waiters hurry and made other customers lower their voices instinctively. But as Marcus approached, he noticed something that didn't fit the picture. Her shoulders were tense in a way that spoke of genuine frustration rather than mere inconvenience. Her fingers drummed against the table in a rhythm that suggested barely controlled anxiety. And when she looked up as he approached, her eyes held a vulnerability that her polished exterior couldn't quite hide. "Ms. Morrison, I'm Marcus Chen from TechSolve Solutions." She looked up, and for a moment, Marcus saw something unexpected flash across her features. Surprise, followed by what might have been disappointment. He'd seen that look before, usually from clients who'd been expecting someone older, more corporate, more obviously successful. Marcus had learned to ignore these initial reactions, knowing that his work would speak louder than his appearance. "Mr. Chen," she said, extending a hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "Victoria Morrison, thank you for coming on short notice." "Of course. What seems to be the problem?" Victoria gestured helplessly at her laptop. "Everything. Nothing. I don't know anymore. This machine contains 3 years of proprietary research, financial projections for the next 5 years, and presentations that could make or break my company's future. As of this morning, it's decided to become a very expensive paperweight." Marcus set his bag down carefully and studied the laptop. A high-end model, probably worth more than most people's cars. The screen displayed an error message he recognized. Immediately, though, he kept his expression neutral. "When did this start?" "Around 9 this morning. I was in the middle of updating a presentation for a board meeting tomorrow when everything just stopped. The screen went blue, then black, and now it's stuck in some kind of loop. Have you tried any troubleshooting steps?" Victoria's laugh held no humor. "I've tried everything I can think of, which admittedly isn't much. I called 3 different tech support lines, waited on hold for 45 minutes total, and was told by various representatives that I should try turning it off and on again, as if I'm some kind of technological neophyte who doesn't understand basic electronics." Marcus nodded, understanding both her frustration and the challenge ahead. High-stakes hardware failures were always delicate situations, especially when they involved proprietary business information. The wrong approach could turn a recoverable problem into a catastrophic data loss. "Would you mind if I take a look?" "Please. At this point, I'm willing to try anything." Marcus pulled up a chair and positioned himself at an angle where he could access the laptop without invading Victoria's personal space. His movements were deliberate and careful as he examined the machine, running through mental checklists while his trained eye catalogued potential issues. The laptop was indeed expensive and sophisticated, but it was also showing signs of hard use. The cooling vents were partially blocked with dust. The battery indicator suggested charging problems, and the hard drive was making subtle sounds that indicated mechanical stress. This wasn't a simple software glitch. This was a machine that had been pushed to its limits and was finally starting to fail. "Ms. Morrison, can I ask about your backup procedures?" Victoria's expression gave him all the answer he needed. "I know I should have been more careful about that, but the information on this computer is so sensitive that I was worried about cloud storage security, and the automatic backup system kept interfering with performance during critical presentations." Marcus nodded without judgment. He'd seen this scenario countless times. Successful, intelligent people who made entirely rational decisions that led to entirely irrational vulnerabilities. Victoria Morrison was clearly brilliant at whatever she did for a living, but like many high achievers, she'd assumed that her expertise in one area would naturally extend to all areas. "Okay," Marcus said, opening his bag and retrieving a diagnostic cable. "Let me see what we're working with here." The next few minutes passed in concentrated silence as Marcus connected his equipment and began running diagnostic routines. Victoria watched intently, her earlier skepticism replaced by something approaching hope. She observed his movements, with the attention of someone who'd learned to evaluate people quickly and accurately. and Marcus could feel her assessment shifting as she watched him work. The diagnostic results confirmed his initial suspicions, multiple hardware issues cascading into system failure, complicated by corrupted boot files and what appeared to be a failing hard drive. It was exactly the kind of problem that corporate tech support would declare unfixable, recommending complete replacement and accepting total data loss as an inevitable casualty. But Marcus had spent years developing solutions for problems that others considered impossible. Where other technicians saw catastrophic failure, he saw a puzzle with multiple potential solutions. His mind raced through possibilities, weighing risks and calculating probabilities, while his hands continued their careful exploration of the failing system. "Well?" Victoria asked finally, her voice carefully controlled. Marcus looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "It's complicated, but not impossible. Your hard drive is failing, which is causing the boot errors, but the data itself appears to be intact. I can probably recover everything, but it's going to take some specialized procedures." "How long?" "A few hours, maybe more. This isn't the kind of work that can be rushed." Victoria glanced around the coffee shop, then back at her silent laptop. "I can't just sit here for hours watching you work. I have meetings, calls, a company to run. I understand. You could leave the machine with me and I could work on it at my shop." The look that crossed Victoria's face suggested he'd just proposed that she hand over her firstborn child to a complete stranger. "This computer contains information that could destroy my company if it fell into the wrong hands. I can't just give it to someone I met 10 minutes ago." Marcus nodded, understanding her position completely. Trust was a luxury that successful. People couldn't afford to give away casually, especially when their livelihood depended on protecting sensitive information. "Then we need to find another solution," he said, beginning to pack up his diagnostic equipment. "Is there somewhere you'd be comfortable having this work done? Your office, maybe?" "My office is in the middle of a renovation. No power, no network, and construction workers everywhere." Victoria rubbed her temples, the gesture of someone fighting a headache that wasn't entirely physical. "This is impossible. I need this fixed, but I can't let the computer out of my sight, and I can't stay here all day." Marcus studied her for a moment, recognizing the particular form of stress that came from having too many responsibilities and not enough hours in the day. He'd felt that pressure himself during the worst months after Sarah's death, when every problem seemed unsolvable and every solution created new complications. "What if I came to you?" he suggested. "I could bring my equipment to wherever you need to be. As long as there's power and reasonable workspace, I can make it work." Victoria looked at him with surprise. "You'd do that? Bring your whole setup to my location? It's not standard procedure, but these aren't standard circumstances. You need the work done, I need the business, and trust has to start somewhere." For the first time since he'd arrived, Victoria's expression softened slightly. "That's actually very thoughtful, but I'm supposed to be at my office building for meetings all afternoon, and like I said, it's under construction." "What about a conference room somewhere? A library, anywhere with tables and electrical outlets?" Victoria pulled out her phone and scrolled through what appeared to be a complex schedule. "There's a small conference room at the business center in my building. It's not being renovated and it should be available. But are you sure you want to drag all your equipment across downtown for one job?" Marcus thought about Emma's tuition payment, due next week, about the rent that was already 3 days late, about the slowly diminishing balance in their savings account and the growing stack of bills on his kitchen counter. "Ms. Morrison, fixing computers isn't just my job, it's what I'm good at. And sometimes the most important repairs happen in the most unlikely places." Victoria studied his face, and Marcus could almost see her mental calculations: risk versus necessity, trust versus caution. Desperation versus prudence. Finally, she nodded. All right, Mr. Chen, let's see what you can do. The business center occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower that spoke of old money and new ambitions. Victoria led Marcus through a marble lobby that echoed with the hushed conversations of people conducting important business, past security guards who nodded respectfully as she passed, and into an elevator that climbed smoothly towards the 23rd floor. The conference room was small but well-appointed, with a polished table, comfortable chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. Marcus set up his equipment carefully, transforming the elegant space into a temporary field hospital for damaged technology. Victoria settled into a chair across from him, her phone buzzing constantly with messages and calls that she answered with crisp efficiency. Between conversations, she watched Marcus work, her curiosity gradually overcoming her initial wariness. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked during a lull in her phone activity. "MIT originally, computer engineering, with a focus on systems architecture." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "MIT? And you're doing house calls for laptop repairs?" Marcus continued working, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. "Life doesn't always follow the plan you make in college." "No," Victoria said quietly, "it certainly doesn't." The repair process was intricate and delicate, requiring the kind of patience and precision that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Marcus worked methodically, his movements economical and purposeful, as he carefully extracted the failing hard drive and connected it to his recovery system. Lines of code scrolled across his laptop screen, while specialized software probed the damaged sectors, searching for intact data like an archaeologist carefully brushing sand from ancient artifacts. Victoria found herself studying this unexpected technician who worked with the focus of a surgeon and spoke with the vocabulary of someone who clearly understood far more than basic computer repair. There was something compelling about his quiet competence, the way he approached each challenge, as if failure simply wasn't an option worth considering. "You have a daughter," Victoria observed, noticing a small photo tucked into the corner of his laptop bag. Marcus glanced up briefly. "Emma, she's 8. Is her mother?" "She passed away 3 years ago." Victoria felt a sudden shift in the conversation's weight. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly difficult." "We manage," Marcus said, returning his attention to the screen where recovery software was slowly cataloging salvageable files. "Emma's stronger than she knows, and more resilient than I ever expected an 8-year-old to be." "And you? How are you managing?" Marcus paused in his work, surprised by the directness of the question. Most clients maintained careful professional boundaries, avoiding personal territory that might complicate business relationships. But something in Victoria's tone suggested genuine interest, rather than mere politeness. "Some days are better than others," he said honestly. "The work helps. Having something I'm good at, something that makes a difference in people's lives, that gives structure to everything else." Victoria nodded slowly. "I understand that. Work as a lifeline, something solid when everything else feels uncertain." "You speak from experience." "Built my company from nothing after my divorce 5 years ago. For a while, it was the only thing that made sense when nothing else did." They worked in companionable silence. After that, Marcus focused on his delicate digital archaeology, while Victoria managed her business through a constant stream of emails and phone calls. The afternoon light shifted across the conference room windows, painting the lake in shades of silver and blue as the recovery process continued. Around 4 o'clock, Marcus's software finally completed its assessment. The results were better than he'd dared hope. Nearly 90% of Victoria's data was recoverable, including all the critical business files she'd mentioned. The presentation that had triggered the morning's crisis was intact, along with the financial projections. and research data that represented years of her professional life. "Ms. Morrison," Marcus said, not wanting to interrupt her phone call but unable to contain his relief, "I think you're going to want to see this." Victoria ended her call quickly and moved to look over his shoulder at the screen. The list of recovered files scrolled down for several pages, each green checkmark representing another piece of her digital life rescued from potential disaster. "This is everything," she breathed, her professional composure cracking slightly. "This is literally everything that matters to my business. The hard drive is definitely failing, so you'll need a replacement as soon as possible. But all your data is safe." Victoria stared at the screen, and Marcus was surprised to see her eyes growing bright with unshed tears. "Mr. Chen, you have no idea what this means. Tomorrow's board meeting could determine whether my company gets the funding we need to expand internationally. Without these presentations, without the financial models and research data..." She trailed off, but Marcus understood. He'd seen this reaction before, the moment when people realized that what they'd thought was lost forever had been returned to them. It was why he loved this work, despite the irregular hours and financial uncertainty. There was something profound about restoring order to chaos, about giving people back pieces of their lives they thought were gone. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, pulling a small external drive from his bag. "I'm going to create a complete backup of everything while we're here. Multiple copies, actually. One for you to keep, one to store off-site, and one encrypted backup that you can access. From the cloud, if you want." Victoria looked at him as if he'd just offered to solve world hunger. "You'd do that? Set up a complete backup system?" "Part of the service. Prevention is always better than recovery." For the next hour, Marcus worked on creating the backup systems while Victoria prepared for her next meeting. As his equipment hummed quietly through the copying process, she found herself stealing glances at this man who'd walked into her crisis and somehow made it manageable. There was something about Marcus Chen that didn't fit her usual categories. He had the technical expertise of the best corporate consultants she'd worked with, but none of their arrogance or inflated sense of importance. He approached her emergency with the same calm competence she imagined he brought to every aspect of his life, including the daunting task of raising a daughter alone. "Mr. Chen," she said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you doing house calls and one-off repairs? With your background, you could be working for any major tech company, making serious money." Marcus finished connecting the final backup drive before answering. "I tried that path once. Worked for a consulting firm right out of school. Spent my days in offices like this one, solving problems for companies that had more money than they knew what to do with." "What changed?" "Emma happened. Then Sarah got sick. Corporate life doesn't leave much room for emergencies or family crises. When you have a child depending on you, flexibility becomes more valuable than a big salary." Victoria nodded slowly. "But surely there are opportunities that would give you both financial security and reasonable family time." Marcus looked out the window at the lake, its surface now reflecting the golden light of late afternoon. "Maybe. But there's something to be said for being your own boss, for choosing your clients and setting your own schedule, for being there when Emma needs me, without having to ask permission or explain to a supervisor why my family comes first. Even if it means financial uncertainty. Even then, money's important, but it's not the only measure of success." Victoria fell quiet, processing this perspective that was so different from her own worldview. She'd spent the last 5 years building Morrison Digital into a company that could compete with established corporations, sacrificing relationships and personal time in pursuit of growth and profitability. The idea of choosing flexibility over financial gain was almost incomprehensible to her. "Your backup system is complete," Marcus announced, disconnecting the final drive and beginning to pack up his equipment. Everything's organized by file. Type and date, with automatic synchronization to a secure cloud service. You shouldn't have to worry about data loss again. Victoria picked up one of the backup drives, a small device that contained her entire professional life. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Marcus looked up from his packing, sensing a shift in the conversation's tone. I've been watching you work for the last few hours, Victoria continued. Your technical skills are obviously exceptional, but that's not what impresses me most. It's your approach, the way you think through problems, the attention to detail, the follow-through on things that other technicians would consider optional extras. She paused, choosing her words carefully. My company is growing rapidly. We're expanding into new markets, taking on larger clients, handling more complex projects. I need someone who can manage our technology infrastructure, not just maintain it, but help it evolve as we grow. Marcus stopped packing, giving her his full attention. I'm offering you a position, Mr. Chen, Chief Technology Officer for Morrison. Digital, full benefits, competitive salary, equity participation, and flexible scheduling that would accommodate your family responsibilities. The offer hung in the air between them like something tangible and significant. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as his mind raced through the implications. Financial security for Emma's future, health insurance, the kind of professional opportunity he'd stopped believing was possible. Ms. Morrison, that's an incredibly generous offer, but you don't really know anything about me beyond what you've seen this afternoon. I know you turned a potential disaster into a manageable problem. I know you have the technical skills to handle complex challenges and the personal integrity to earn my trust with sensitive information. I know you think beyond the immediate problem to create long-term solutions. Victoria leaned forward, her business instincts fully engaged. But mostly, I know that in 3 hours, you've shown me more genuine competence and reliability than I've seen from some consultants I've worked with for months. Marcus set down his laptop bag, suddenly aware that this conversation might be the most important one he'd had since Sarah's death. What exactly would this position involve? Everything. Network security, system integration, technology planning, vendor management. You'd be responsible for ensuring that our infrastructure can support our growth while maintaining the security and reliability our clients expect. And the flexible scheduling you mentioned? I need someone who can get the job done, not someone who sits in an office for 40 hours a week just to prove they're committed. If you can manage our technology needs while being available for school plays and parent-teacher conferences, that works for me. Marcus found himself thinking about Emma, about the opportunities this kind of position could provide for her future. College funds, family vacations, the kind of stability he'd been working toward for 3 years, but had never quite achieved. Can I ask why you're offering this to someone you just met? Victoria smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her all day. Because sometimes the best decisions are the ones that feel obvious once you stop overthinking them. I've been interviewing CTOs for 3 months, looking at resumes and checking references and conducting formal evaluations. But none of those candidates did what you did today. Which was? They solved my immediate problem while creating lasting solutions for future problems I hadn't even thought of yet. That's not just technical skill, that's leadership. Marcus stared out the window at the city spreading below them, thinking about the morning's routine with Emma, about the careful budgeting and constant worry about unexpected expenses. Then he thought about the possibility of a different kind of life, one where financial stress didn't dictate every decision, where he could focus on being a father without constantly calculating the cost. Ms. Morrison, if you're serious about this offer, I'd like to discuss it further, But I should warn you, Emma comes first, always, if that's going to be a problem. Mr. Chen, Victoria interrupted, the fact that you put your daughter first tells me everything I need to know about your priorities and your character. That's not a liability. It's exactly the kind of integrity I want in someone who'll have access to every aspect of my business. Marcus extended his hand. Then I think we have a lot to talk about. Victoria shook his hand, and for the first time in months, she felt the satisfaction that came from making a decision that was both strategically sound and intuitively right. Welcome to Morrison Digital, Mr. Chen. I have a feeling this is going to be the beginning of something remarkable. Outside the conference room windows, the sun was setting over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. The city lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, and somewhere across town, Emma Chen was probably finishing her homework and wondering what interesting problems her father had solved that day. Neither Marcus nor Victoria could have predicted that morning how dramatically their lives would change by evening. But sometimes the most important repairs happen not to machines, but to the hopes and possibilities we thought were permanently broken. And sometimes the person who knows how to fix what's damaged isn't who you expect. They're exactly who you need, arriving at precisely the moment when everything seems impossible. As they left the conference room together, discussing salary ranges and start dates and the logistics of Marcus transitioning his existing clients, neither of them noticed that Victoria's phone had stopped buzzing with urgent messages, or that Marcus's shoulders had lost the tension he'd carried for 3 years. They were too busy planning a future that neither of them had imagined that morning, but both of them recognized as exactly what they'd been searching for without quite knowing how to find it. The Morrison Digital headquarters occupied 4 floors of a glass tower that reflected the morning sky like a mirror. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the building that would become his professional home, feeling the familiar mixture of excitement and anxiety that accompanied all significant life changes. In his hand, he carried a leather portfolio containing signed contracts, benefit paperwork, and a security badge with his photo next to the title Chief Technology Officer, words that still felt surreal when he read them. 3 weeks had passed since that afternoon in the conference room, when Victoria Morrison had offered him a position that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of his and Emma's lives. 3 weeks of background checks, reference calls, and detailed discussions about salary, benefits, and the scope of his responsibilities. 3 weeks of careful consideration and late-night conversations with Emma about what this change would mean for their small family. Emma had taken the news with the practical wisdom that 8-year-olds sometimes possess in surprising abundance. "Does this mean we can finally get the good cereal?" she'd asked, and when Marcus had laughed and said yes, she'd declared the career change officially approved. Her enthusiasm had helped quiet some of his own doubts about accepting such a significant opportunity from someone he'd known for less than a day. The lobby of Morrison Digital buzzed with the controlled energy of a successful company in growth mode. Employees moved with purpose through the marble and steel space, their conversations creating a low hum of productivity and ambition. Marcus approached the reception desk, where a young woman with a warm smile and efficient manner checked his name against a list and directed him to the 27th floor. Victoria's assistant, David, met Marcus at the elevator with a clipboard and the kind of cheerful professionalism that suggested he'd been briefed extensively on the new CTO's arrival. "Mr. Chen, welcome to Morrison Digital. Ms. Morrison is finishing up a call with our Tokyo office, but she asked me to give you the full tour while we wait." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, departmental overviews, and technology assessments that left Marcus both impressed and slightly overwhelmed. Morrison Digital employed 43 people across 4 departments: software development, digital marketing, data analytics, and client services. Their client roster included mid-sized corporations, government agencies, and 2 Fortune 500 companies that Marcus recognized from business magazines. The technology infrastructure was sophisticated, but showed signs of rapid growth and insufficient planning. Servers hummed in a cramped room that had clearly been repurposed from office space. Network cables snaked along baseboards and through ceiling tiles in configurations that made Marcus's engineering sensibilities cringe. Security protocols were inconsistent across departments, and backup systems appeared to have been implemented piecemeal over several years. "As you can see," David said diplomatically, "there's room for improvement in our technical operations." Marcus nodded, his mind already cataloging priorities and potential solutions. This wasn't just a job, it was a complete infrastructure overhaul that would require months of careful planning and implementation. The challenge excited him in a way he hadn't felt since his university days, when complex problems were puzzles to be solved rather than obstacles to be endured. Victoria appeared as they finished the tour, emerging from her office with the focused energy of someone who just concluded difficult negotiations. She wore a navy suit that spoke of boardroom authority, but Marcus noticed the slight tension around her eyes that suggested the Tokyo call hadn't gone entirely as planned. "Marcus, excellent timing. How was the tour?" "Comprehensive. David's given me a good overview of current operations and existing challenges." Victoria nodded approvingly. "David, would you mind clearing my calendar for the next hour? I want to brief Marcus personally on some of our more sensitive projects." Victoria's office occupied a corner of the 27th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of Chicago's downtown district. The space was elegantly appointed, but unmistakably functional. Expensive furniture chosen for comfort and durability rather than mere appearance. Bookshelves lined with technical manuals and business texts, and a conference table surrounded by chairs that had clearly hosted countless strategic discussions. "Coffee?" Victoria asked, gesturing toward a sophisticated machine that looked capable of producing beverages Marcus couldn't pronounce. "Please, black is fine." As Victoria prepared their coffee, Marcus studied the artwork on her walls. Not the generic corporate landscapes he'd expected, but original pieces that suggested personal taste and substantial investment. One painting in particular caught his attention, an abstract representation of data flows that somehow managed to be both technically accurate and aesthetically compelling. "Local artist," Victoria said, noticing his interest. "She specializes in making technology beautiful. I commissioned that piece after we landed our first major contract. It's remarkable, the way she's represented network topology as organic growth patterns." Victoria handed him a cup and settled into the chair across from him. "You see the technical accuracy. Most people just see pretty colors. Pattern recognition is part of the job. Speaking of which, I need to brief you on why I really hired you." Marcus raised an eyebrow, suddenly wondering if there were aspects of this position that hadn't been disclosed during his interviews. Victoria activated a privacy screen on her office windows and locked the door, precautions that immediately elevated the conversation's significance. "Marcus, Morrison Digital isn't just another consulting firm. We specialize in digital forensics and cybersecurity for clients who can't afford to trust traditional providers." She opened a secure laptop and turned the screen toward him. "Government agencies, international corporations, legal firms handling sensitive litigation, clients who need absolute discretion and technical excellence. The kind of work where failure isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous." Marcus studied the project summaries on the screen, recognizing several high-profile cases that had made national news. Morrison Digital had provided technical analysis for corporate espionage investigations, election security assessments, and cyber attack response efforts that had shaped public policy and international relations. This is significantly more complex than what I expected, which is exactly why I need someone with your background, not just the MIT education, but the practical experience with system recovery under pressure. The way you handled my laptop crisis demonstrated the kind of calm competence our most critical projects require. Victoria pulled up another file, this one marked with security classifications that made Marcus realize the full scope of what she was revealing. We're currently working on 3 major cases. A pharmaceutical company that suspects their research. Data has been compromised by foreign competitors, a municipal government that discovered unauthorized access to their voter registration databases, and a federal contract that I can't discuss in detail, but involves infrastructure security for critical national systems. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a familiar but heavier coat. Ms. Morrison, I appreciate your confidence in my abilities, but this level of work requires security clearances, specialized certifications, compliance with federal regulations that I may not. Already handled, Victoria interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. Your clearance applications were submitted last week and fast-tracked through contacts in the Department of Homeland Security. Your MIT transcripts and work history made the background check remarkably straightforward. Marcus opened the folder to find documentation that represented weeks of bureaucratic processes completed with efficiency that spoke of significant influence and careful planning. You were very confident I'd accept the position. I was confident that the right person would recognize the right opportunity when it presented itself. The next 2 hours passed in detailed briefings on current projects, security protocols, and the technical challenges that would define Marcus's first months at Morrison Digital. Victoria's presentation was thorough and professional, but Marcus sensed underlying tensions that went beyond normal business pressures. There's something else, isn't there? He asked finally. Victoria paused in her explanation of client confidentiality agreements, studying his face with the evaluative expression he'd learned to recognize as her default mode when processing important decisions. You're perceptive. Yes, there's something else. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city with an expression that mixed determination and concern. Marcus, Morrison Digital has been successful because we operate in spaces where larger firms fear to tread. We take on cases that others consider too risky, too politically sensitive, or too technically challenging. And that's created enemies. Competitors who resent our success, former clients who weren't happy with our findings, government officials who prefer their scandals remain buried. Victoria turned back to face him. 3 months ago, someone attempted to hack our internal systems. Last month, our insurance carrier received anonymous tips about supposed security violations that triggered a comprehensive audit. 2 weeks ago, a competitor filed a complaint with the State Department suggesting that our international work violated export control regulations. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office's air conditioning. Someone's conducting a coordinated campaign against your company. That's my assessment. Nothing overtly illegal. Nothing that crosses obvious lines, but a pattern of harassment designed to undermine our credibility and strain our resources. Have you involved law enforcement? Victoria's laugh held no humor. With what evidence? Suspicious coincidences and unnamed sources. The authorities we'd normally contact for help are sometimes the same agencies we're investigating for other clients. Conflict of interest doesn't begin to describe the complications. Marcus understood the isolation that came with possessing information that others preferred remain hidden. During his years as an independent consultant, he'd encountered situations where discretion wasn't just professional courtesy, but personal safety. What do you need from me specifically? Complete security assessment of all our systems, identification of vulnerabilities that could be exploited for sabotage or data theft, implementation of countermeasures that can protect us without interfering with our ability to serve clients effectively. Victoria returned to her chair, her expression serious but determined. And Marcus, I need to know that you're committed to this work despite the complications it might create in your personal life. The mention of personal complications brought Emma immediately to mind. Marcus thought about the simple routine of their morning walks to school, the quiet evenings working on homework and folding laundry, the uncomplicated satisfaction of being a father whose biggest worry was whether his daughter remembered her lunch money. Ms. Morrison, I need to ask directly, is there any realistic possibility that these threats could extend to my family? Victoria met his gaze without hesitation. I won't lie to you, Marcus. People who are willing to attack a business through bureaucratic harassment might escalate their methods if they feel sufficiently threatened. But I also believe that strong security and careful operational procedures can minimize those risks significantly. And if I decide this level of risk isn't acceptable for a single father, then I'll understand completely, provide you with severance compensation, and ensure that your departure doesn't affect your professional reputation in any way. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street where normal people conducted normal business without worrying about corporate espionage or political retaliation. For 3 years, he'd focused exclusively on providing Emma with stability and security, building a life that was modest but predictable. But he also thought about the opportunities this position could provide, not just financial security, but the chance to work on problems that mattered, to use his skills in ways that could make genuine differences in people's lives. The technical challenges alone were more compelling than anything he'd encountered since graduate school. I need to think about this overnight, he said finally. Of course. Take whatever time you need. Marcus gathered his papers and headed toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Ms. Morrison, can I ask why you're trusting me with this information before I've formally committed to staying? Victoria smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her all morning. Because your first concern was your daughter's safety, not your own career advancement. That tells me everything I need to know about your priorities and your character. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Emma, helping her with math homework, while his mind processed the revelations of the day. The familiar routine of checking addition problems and explaining long division provided comfort and perspective as he weighed the implications of Victoria's offer. Dad, you're being weird tonight, Emma observed, looking up from her worksheet. You've checked that same problem 3 times. Sorry, kiddo. Just thinking about work stuff. Good work stuff or bad work stuff? Marcus considered how to explain corporate espionage and security threats to an 8-year-old. Complicated work stuff. The kind where there aren't easy answers. Emma nodded with the seriousness she reserved for grown-up problems she didn't fully understand, but recognized as important. Is it the kind of complicated where we might have to move or change schools? I don't think so, but it might mean some changes in our routine. More security precautions, different schedules sometimes. Like what kind of security precautions? Marcus smiled at her practical curiosity. Maybe a security system for the apartment, being more careful about who we give personal information to, checking in with each other more regularly when we're apart. Emma considered this with the grave attention she gave all new rules and procedures. Will it keep us safe? That's the idea. Then I think it's okay. Besides, our life could probably use some more excitement. Marcus laughed, struck once again by his daughter's resilience and adaptability. You think our life is boring? Not boring, just predictable. Maybe having some adventure would be good for us. That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus called his sister Jennifer in Seattle. As Emma's godmother and Marcus's closest confidant, Jennifer had helped him navigate the challenges of single parenthood with practical advice and unwavering support. Corporate espionage. Jennifer's voice carried clearly through the phone, despite the 3-hour time difference. Marcus, when you said you'd found a better job, I was expecting something involving health insurance and vacation days, not international intrigue. It's not quite that dramatic, but there are definitely risks I need to consider. What does your gut tell you? Marcus stared out his living room window at the familiar neighborhood street, thinking about Emma's comment regarding predictability and adventure. My gut tells me this is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come along twice. The work is challenging, the compensation is excellent, and the potential for professional growth is unlimited. But I've spent 3 years building a life that prioritizes Emma's stability above everything else. Taking this position means accepting some uncertainty in exchange for potentially greater long-term security. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could hear her processing the implications with the analytical mind that had made her successful as a financial planner. Marcus, you've done an incredible job providing Emma with stability and security. But stability isn't just about maintaining routines. It's about building a foundation that can support growth and opportunity. Meaning that Emma's long-term security might be better served by you taking calculated risks now rather than playing it safe indefinitely. College funds, expanded opportunities, the chance for her to see her father pursuing meaningful work. Those things matter, too. And if something goes wrong, then you'll handle it the same way you've handled everything else since Sarah died, by putting Emma first and finding solutions that protect what matters most. After ending the call, Marcus walked through his small apartment, noting details he'd stopped seeing through familiarity. The careful organization that maximized limited space, the second-hand furniture that was functional but uninspiring, the small stack of bills on the counter that required constant attention and careful budgeting. He thought about Emma's college fund, currently growing slowly through modest monthly contributions, about the medical bills from Sarah's illness that still affected their credit rating, about the dreams he'd postponed indefinitely in favor of immediate necessities. Victoria Morrison was offering him a chance to change those equations fundamentally, not just through salary increases, but through the kind of professional opportunity that could redefine his career trajectory and expand possibilities he'd stopped believing were realistic. But she was also asking him to accept risks that went beyond normal employment concerns. The knowledge that his work might make enemies, that his family might require protection, that success could come with complications he couldn't fully anticipate or control. Marcus made his decision sometime around midnight, sitting in Emma's doorway and watching her sleep peacefully beneath a ceiling decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars. She looked so small and trusting, depending on him to make choices that would shape her future while protecting her present. He thought about Sarah, about the conversations they'd had during her illness regarding Emma's future, and the importance of taking chances on opportunities that could make significant differences. Sarah had been the dreamer in their relationship, the one who encouraged calculated risks and believed in the possibility of unexpected success. "Take the job," she would have said if she'd been there to offer advice. "Emma's stronger than you. Think, and you're more capable than you allow yourself to believe. Some opportunities are worth the uncertainty." The next morning, Marcus called Victoria before Emma woke up. "Ms. Morrison, it's Marcus Chen. I've made my decision. I'm listening. I accept the position with one non-negotiable condition. which is complete transparency about security threats as they develop. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with so I can make informed decisions about protecting my family. Victoria's relief was audible through the phone. Agreed. Welcome aboard, Marcus. I think you're going to find this work more rewarding than you expect. I hope so. When do you want me to start? How about today? We have a situation developing with one of our federal contracts that could use your immediate attention. Marcus looked around his quiet apartment, then at the photo of Emma on his bedside table. Give me 2 hours to arrange childcare and I'll be there. Marcus. Yes? Thank you for trusting me, for taking this risk. I know it wasn't an easy decision. Ms. Morrison, 3 years ago, I learned that the biggest risks sometimes come from playing it too safe. I'd rather face uncertain challenges than certain limitations. After ending the call, Marcus went to wake Emma with the news that their lives were about to change in ways neither of them could fully imagine. As he watched her process the information with characteristic resilience and curiosity, he felt the familiar mixture of excitement and responsibility that came with all significant transitions. But for the first time in 3 years, excitement outweighed anxiety. Victoria Morrison had offered him more than just employment. She'd offered him the chance to build something meaningful while providing Emma with opportunities he'd only dreamed about during the long nights when bills exceeded income and possibilities seemed permanently limited. As they walked to school together that morning, Emma chattering about what changes might come with her father's new job, Marcus felt something shift in his perspective on their future. Instead of managing carefully calculated limitations, he was about to start building toward unlimited possibilities. The adventure Emma had mentioned was about to begin, and for the first time since Sarah's death, Marcus felt ready to embrace uncertainty in service of something larger than mere survival. Morrison Digital was waiting, along with challenges that would test everything he'd learned about technology, security, and the delicate balance between professional ambition and family responsibility. But as he dropped Emma at school and headed toward his new life, Marcus carried with him the confidence that came from making decisions based on possibility rather than fear. Victoria Morrison needed someone who could handle complex technical challenges while maintaining absolute discretion. Emma needed a father who could provide security while demonstrating that calculated risks sometimes led to extraordinary opportunities. Marcus Chen was about to discover whether he could be both. The emergency call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, piercing through Marcus's sleep like a digital alarm bell that refused to be ignored. His phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand, displaying Victoria's number alongside a text message that made his blood run cold. Federal contract compromised. Need you here immediately. This is not a drill. Marcus was out of bed and pulling on clothes before his mind fully processed what he was reading. In the 3 months since joining Morrison Digital, he'd become accustomed to urgent calls and after-hours consultations. But the tone of Victoria's message suggested something far beyond routine technical difficulties. Emma stirred in her bedroom as Marcus moved quietly through the apartment, gathering his laptop bag and security credentials. She appeared in her doorway, hair tousled and eyes heavy with sleep, wearing the oversized t-shirt she'd claimed as her favorite pajamas. "Dad, is everything okay?" Marcus paused in his preparations, weighing how much to explain to an 8-year-old about cybersecurity emergencies and federal contracts. "Work emergency, sweetheart. I need to go in early. Really early, like middle of the night early. Yes, Mrs. Patterson from downstairs said she could come up if I ever needed emergency childcare. Should I call her?" Emma shook her head, displaying the independence that sometimes surprised him with its maturity. "I'll be fine until normal wake-up time. Then I'll get ready for school like always." Marcus knelt down to her level, studying her face for any signs of anxiety or uncertainty. "Are you sure? This isn't like the other times when I've had to leave early." "Dad, I'm 8, not 3. I know how to brush my teeth and make cereal, and Mrs. Patterson is right downstairs if something weird happens." He kissed her forehead, marveling once again at the resilience that allowed her to adapt to sudden changes with equanimity that many adults couldn't manage. "I'll call you before school starts. And Emma, if anything feels wrong or scary, you go straight to Mrs. Patterson, okay?" "Okay, Dad." "Yeah? Is this the kind of emergency where bad people might be involved?" "Marcus, I need to brief you on some additional context that wasn't included in your initial security clearance." She opened a secure laptop and entered multiple passwords and biometric confirmations before accessing files marked with classifications that made Marcus realize how far beyond normal consulting work Morrison Digital had ventured. 6 months ago, the FBI contacted us about a pattern of cyber attacks targeting energy infrastructure, water treatment facilities, and transportation networks across the Midwest. The files displayed on the screen documented a sophisticated campaign of reconnaissance and probing attacks that suggested preparation for coordinated strikes against regional infrastructure systems. The attacks were subtle and carefully spaced to avoid detection, but when analyzed collectively, they revealed a disturbing pattern of systematic intelligence gathering. The Bureau asked us to conduct vulnerability assessments on critical systems while monitoring for signs of continued reconnaissance activities. Our Department of Energy contract was part of that larger investigation. Marcus studied the attack patterns, recognizing the level of sophistication and coordination that suggested state-sponsored activities or extremely well-funded criminal organizations. So our breach isn't just corporate espionage, it's potentially related to a broader threat against regional infrastructure. That's our assessment. And Marcus, if the modified files are being used to plan actual attacks on power systems or water treatment facilities, people could die. This isn't just about protecting proprietary information anymore. The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a lead blanket. When he'd accepted the position at Morrison Digital, he'd understood that the work would involve sensitive projects and sophisticated clients, but he hadn't fully grasped that his technical decisions could have life or death consequences for thousands of people. "What do you need me to do?" Victoria pulled up network diagrams and security protocols on multiple monitors. "Complete forensic analysis of the breach. I need to know exactly how they got in, what they took, what they modified, and whether they left any backdoors for future access. The FBI is sending a team, but they'll need our technical analysis to understand the full scope of the compromise. And if we discover that the breach was facilitated by someone inside the company, then we handle it carefully and quietly, until we understand whether we're dealing with a compromised employee or active sabotage." Marcus began setting up his diagnostic equipment, connecting specialized hardware to Morrison Digital's servers while running software designed to trace intrusion patterns and identify security vulnerabilities. The work required intense concentration and methodical analysis, but his mind kept drifting to Emma, sleeping peacefully in their apartment while he dealt with threats that could affect the infrastructure she depended on for safety and security. The forensic analysis consumed the next 6 hours, revealing details about the breach that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of sophisticated planning and execution. The attackers had used advanced, persistent threat techniques, maintaining low-level access to Morrison Digital systems for weeks before executing the data theft. They'd studied normal usage patterns, identified optimal timing for their activities, and crafted custom malware that could evade detection while systematically gathering intelligence about target systems. "Victoria, you need to see this." Marcus called from his workstation, where lines of code scrolled across multiple monitors. Victoria approached with coffee for both of them, noting the tension in Marcus's posture that suggested significant discoveries. "And what did you find?" "The attackers didn't just gain access last night. They've been in our systems for at least 3 weeks, possibly longer. They used a technique called living off the land, compromising legitimate administrative tools to conduct their activities without deploying obvious malware." Marcus highlighted specific log entries that showed subtle anomalies in system behavior over the previous month. They were incredibly patient and methodical. Instead of grabbing everything at once, they studied our security measures, identified the most valuable files, and planned their theft to minimize detection risks. How did they gain initial access? That's the concerning part. The initial compromise appears to have come through a spear phishing attack targeted at one of our employees. But the attack was so sophisticated and personalized that it suggests extensive prior reconnaissance about our personnel and operations. Victoria studied the technical evidence with the expression of someone who understood the implications without needing detailed explanations. Someone spent considerable time and resources learning about our company before attempting this breach. More than that, the spear phishing attack was sent to Rebecca Martinez in our accounting department, but the email referenced specific projects she'd been working on and included attachments that appeared to come from legitimate clients. Victoria's expression grew darker as she processed this information. Rebecca has been with us for 18 months. She's thorough, reliable, and security conscious. If she opened a malicious attachment, it's because the attack was extremely convincing. Marcus pulled up the forensic analysis of the malicious email, displaying headers and metadata that revealed the sophistication of the social engineering attack. The email appeared to come from Hartwell Industries, one of our current clients. It referenced a real project, included accurate technical details, and was sent from an email address that differed from Hartwell's legitimate domain by only a single character. Have you contacted Hartwell to verify whether they sent anything to Rebecca? Already checked. Hartwell has no record of sending any emails to our accounting department in the last month. The attackers created a convincing forgery based on detailed knowledge of our client relationships and ongoing projects. The implications were clear and troubling. Someone had conducted extensive surveillance of Morrison Digital's operations before attempting the breach, gathering intelligence about personnel, client relationships, and project details that would be difficult to obtain without inside access or sophisticated reconnaissance activities. Marcus, I need you to expand your analysis to include all system access over the last 2 months. If the attackers have been surveilling us for weeks, there might be evidence of earlier intrusion attempts or reconnaissance activities. The expanded analysis revealed additional disturbing details about the scope and duration of the surveillance campaign. The attackers had systematically gathered information about Morrison Digital's employees, clients, projects, and security procedures over a period of at least 6 weeks before executing the data theft. They knew our personnel schedules, our client communication patterns, our project timelines, and our security protocols, Marcus reported, as patterns emerged from the forensic data. This level of intelligence gathering suggests either extended surveillance by professional operatives or assistance from someone with legitimate access to our internal operations. Victoria remained silent for several minutes, processing the implications of Marcus's findings. The revelation that Morrison Digital had been under sophisticated surveillance for weeks fundamentally changed the nature of the security threat they were facing. Marcus, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Is there any possibility that you could have inadvertently introduced vulnerabilities into our systems during your security assessment work? Any chance that your diagnostic tools or procedures could have been exploited by the attackers? Marcus had been expecting this question since beginning the forensic analysis. It was a logical concern given his recent arrival at the company and his extensive access to sensitive systems. I've been wondering the same thing. Let me show you something. He pulled up logs from his own system access over the previous months, displaying every connection, every diagnostic procedure, and every security modification he'd implemented. My access patterns are completely documented, and all my diagnostic tools include integrity verification to prevent them from being used as attack vectors. But someone with knowledge of my security assessment work could potentially have used that information to identify vulnerabilities before I had a chance to patch them. If there's a leak inside the company, my reports could have provided a roadmap for the attackers. Victoria studied the access logs with the careful attention of someone who understood that careers and reputations could be destroyed by security failures. Marcus, I need you to know that I don't suspect you of any intentional wrongdoing. But given the timing of your arrival and the sophistication of this attack, the FBI is going to ask hard questions about whether your presence here is connected to the breach. Marcus felt his heart clench at the directness of her question. Emma had absorbed more about his work than he'd realized, picking up implications and concerns that he'd tried to shield her from. I don't know yet, kiddo, but that's why I have to go in and figure out what's happening. Be careful. Always am. The streets of Chicago at 3 in the morning possessed an eerie quality that Marcus had never experienced during his normal daytime commutes. Traffic lights cycled through their colors for empty intersections. Delivery trucks moved like mechanical ghosts through the urban landscape. The city felt suspended between night and day, existing in a liminal space where normal rules seemed temporarily suspended. Morrison Digital's building stood illuminated against the dark sky, its windows glowing with an intensity that spoke of crisis management and emergency protocols. Marcus used his security badge to access the underground parking garage, noting the presence of several cars that suggested other staff members had also received urgent summons. The elevator ride to the 27th floor felt longer than usual, giving Marcus time to consider possible scenarios that might constitute a federal contract emergency. Cyber attacks on government systems, data breaches involving classified information, security failures that could compromise national infrastructure. None of the possibilities were reassuring. Victoria met him at the elevator doors, her professional composure intact despite the early hour and obvious stress. She wore a business suit that suggested she'd never gone to bed, and her eyes held the sharp focus that Marcus had learned to associate with crisis management mode. Marcus, thank God you're here. We have a situation that's developing faster than we can contain it. What happened? Victoria led him through corridors that buzzed with activity despite the pre-dawn hour. Staff members moved with urgent purpose between offices and conference rooms, their conversations conducted in the clipped tones of people managing multiple emergencies simultaneously. The Department of Energy contract we've been working on, under the one involving power grid vulnerability assessments, someone gained unauthorized access to our secure servers. They downloaded terabytes of data, including infrastructure maps, security protocols, and assessment reports that could be used to target critical systems. Marcus felt the implications hit him like a physical blow. Infrastructure security wasn't abstract cybersecurity theory. It was the foundation that kept hospitals running, traffic systems functioning, and communication networks operational. In the wrong hands, the stolen information could facilitate attacks that affected millions of people. When was the breach discovered? 47 minutes ago. Our automated monitoring systems flagged unusual data transfer patterns, but by the time our security team investigated, the files had already been copied and the intrusion had ended. They entered a conference room that had been converted into a crisis management center. Multiple monitors displayed network diagrams, server logs, and data transfer analytics, while staff members worked frantically to assess the scope of the breach and identify potential countermeasures. David, Victoria's assistant, looked up from a laptop with an expression that mixed exhaustion and determination. "Marcus, we've been trying to trace the attack vector, but whoever did this was extremely sophisticated. They used multiple proxy servers, encrypted connections, and what appears to be a custom malware package designed specifically for our system architecture." Marcus set down his bag and immediately began reviewing the technical evidence displayed on the monitors. The attack patterns were indeed sophisticated, demonstrating intimate knowledge of Morrison Digital's security protocols and network topology. This wasn't the work of opportunistic hackers or amateur cyber criminals. This was a carefully planned operation conducted by professionals with significant resources and specific objectives. "Have you notified the Department of Energy?" Victoria's expression darkened. "That's where things get complicated. The contract includes specific protocols for reporting security incidents, but those protocols assume that breaches result from external attacks by unknown parties. And you don't think this was an external attack? Marcus, look at the attack patterns. Whoever did this knew exactly where our sensitive files were stored, which security measures to bypass, and how to extract maximum data while avoiding our most sophisticated monitoring systems. They had inside knowledge of our operations." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the breach had been facilitated by someone with legitimate access to Morrison Digital systems, then the security failure was internal rather than external. It meant that someone within the company had either been compromised or was actively working against their interests. "Do we have any suspects?" Victoria pulled up personnel files on a secure laptop. 12 people have access to the servers that were compromised. 7 have been with the company for more than 2 years. 3 were hired within the last 6 months. And 2 are contractors who work on site but aren't full employees. Marcus studied the files, looking for patterns or inconsistencies that might indicate security risks. "What about remote access logs? Can we determine who was connected to the system when the breach occurred?" David activated another monitor, displaying connection records from the previous 24 hours. "That's the problem. The attack happened during a scheduled maintenance window when several people had legitimate reasons to be accessing the systems remotely. The intrusion was designed to coincide with normal administrative activities, which means whoever planned this knew our maintenance schedules and understood our operational procedures well enough to camouflage their activities." Victoria nodded grimly. "Exactly. And Marcus, there's something else. The stolen files weren't just copied, they were modified during the transfer process. Someone inserted false information into some of the infrastructure reports before stealing them." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. Modifying stolen data suggested objectives beyond simple espionage or financial gain. Someone was planning to use the compromised information for purposes that required specific alterations to make their plans more effective. What kind of modifications? Subtle changes to security protocols, false information about backup systems and emergency procedures, alterations that would make certain types of attacks more likely to succeed while making defensive responses less effective. The scope of the conspiracy became clearer as Marcus processed this information. Someone hadn't just stolen sensitive government data. They'd weaponized it by making targeted modifications that could facilitate future attacks on critical infrastructure. The implications went far beyond corporate cybersecurity into the realm of national security and public safety. We need to assume that this is part of a larger operation, Marcus said, his mind racing through possible scenarios and countermeasures. If someone was willing to infiltrate our company, to steal and modify federal infrastructure data, they're probably planning something significant. Victoria activated privacy screens on the conference room windows and locked the door. Signals that the conversation was about to enter even more sensitive territory. I understand, and I want them to ask those questions. If there's any possibility that I've been compromised or manipulated, we need to identify it before it leads to additional security failures. The conversation was interrupted by David's voice over the intercom system. Ms. Morrison, the FBI team has arrived. They're requesting immediate briefings on the security breach and access to all relevant technical evidence. Victoria looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed determination and concern. Are you ready for this? Federal investigations can be intense, and they're going to scrutinize every aspect of your background and activities since joining the company. Marcus thought about Emma, probably finishing breakfast and preparing for school, while remaining unaware that her father was about to be questioned by federal agents about cybersecurity threats and potential national security implications. I'm ready. The sooner we identify how this happened and who was responsible, the sooner we can prevent it from happening again. The FBI team consisted of 3 agents with different specializations: cybersecurity, counterintelligence, and forensic analysis. They established themselves in Morrison Digital's largest conference room, transforming it into a temporary command center with portable computers, secure communication equipment, and documentation systems designed to manage complex investigations. Agent Sarah Chen, the lead cybersecurity specialist, introduced herself with the professional courtesy that characterized federal law enforcement interactions with cooperative witnesses. Mr. Chen, we understand you've been conducting forensic analysis of the security breach. We'd like to review your findings and ask some questions about your role in the company's security operations. The next 3 hours passed in detailed technical discussions and careful questioning about Marcus's background, his security clearance process, and his activities since joining Morrison Digital. The agents were thorough but respectful, clearly distinguishing between necessary investigative procedures and accusations of wrongdoing. Mr. Chen, Agent Chen said finally, your forensic analysis has been extremely helpful, and your cooperation with this investigation is appreciated. Based on our preliminary assessment, we don't believe you were involved in facilitating the security breach. Marcus felt relief wash over him like cool water. Thank you. I know the timing of my arrival made me a logical person to investigate. That's correct. But your analysis revealed attack patterns that predate your employment here, and your security modifications actually prevented the breach from being more extensive than it was. Agent Rodriguez, the counterintelligence specialist, leaned forward with the expression of someone preparing to discuss sensitive information. Mr. Chen, we need to brief you on some additional context about this investigation that wasn't included in your initial security clearance. The briefing that followed revealed the true scope of the threat that Morrison Digital had become entangled with. The infrastructure reconnaissance campaign was part of a larger operation targeting critical systems across multiple states, with the evidence suggesting coordination by foreign intelligence services working in collaboration with domestic criminal organizations. The data stolen from your company represents one piece of a larger intelligence gathering effort, Agent Rodriguez explained. But the modifications made to your files suggest that the stolen information is being prepared for use in actual attacks rather than just intelligence gathering. Victoria spoke for the first time since the FBI briefing began. Agent Rodriguez, what does this mean for my company and my employees? Are we still targets for additional attacks? That's a reasonable assumption. Organizations that have been successfully penetrated are often targeted again, especially if the attackers believe they can gain access to additional valuable information. Agent Chen activated a secure laptop and pulled up threat assessment. Documents marked with multiple classification levels. We're implementing enhanced security protocols for Morrison Digital, including continuous monitoring, threat intelligence sharing, and protective measures for key personnel. Key personnel? Individuals whose knowledge or access could make them targets for recruitment, coercion, or surveillance. That includes senior management, security personnel, and anyone with access to sensitive client information. Marcus felt a familiar chill as he realized the implications for his family. Agent Chen, does that include measures to protect family members who might be used as leverage against key personnel? Yes, Mr. Chen. We'll be implementing security protocols that include your daughter's safety and your family's protection. Oh, the remainder of the briefing covered operational security procedures, communication protocols, and emergency procedures that would govern Morrison Digital's operations while the investigation continued. Marcus signed additional security agreements and received training on threat recognition and response procedures that made the abstract concept of corporate espionage feel uncomfortably personal and immediate. As the FBI team concluded their briefing and began establishing their temporary operations center, Marcus realized that his life had fundamentally changed in ways he was still processing. What had begun as an opportunity for professional advancement and financial security had evolved into involvement with threats that could affect national security and public safety. But he also recognized that retreat was no longer an option. The work he'd done to identify and analyze the security breach had made him a valuable asset to the investigation, and his knowledge of Morrison Digital systems made him essential to preventing future attacks. Victoria found him in his office as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city below. Marcus, I know this isn't what you signed up for when you accepted this position. No, it isn't, but it's what the job requires now, and Emma and I will adapt to whatever security measures are necessary. Are you sure? Because if you want to withdraw from this situation, I'll understand and support your decision completely. Marcus looked out at the city where Emma was probably finishing her school day, unaware that her father's work had taken on implications that could affect her safety and their family's security. Ms. Morrison, 3 months ago you offered me an opportunity to do meaningful work that could make a real difference. Today I discovered that meaningful work sometimes comes with meaningful risks. And I'd rather face those risks while doing something that matters than avoid them by doing something that doesn't. Victoria smiled with genuine warmth and respect. Marcus, I think that may be the most important decision either of us has made since this investigation began. As evening approached and normal business operations resumed around the continuing crisis management activities, Marcus prepared to return home to Emma with the knowledge that their lives had been permanently altered by events beyond their control. But he also carried with him the satisfaction that came from using his skills to address threats that could affect thousands of people who would never know how close they'd come to catastrophic infrastructure failures. The test of fire had begun, and both Marcus and Victoria were about to discover whether their partnership could withstand the pressures of federal investigations, sophisticated adversaries, and the delicate balance between professional responsibilities and personal safety. Emma was waiting with homework questions and stories about her school day, unaware that her father had spent the day helping to prevent potential attacks on the systems that kept her world running safely and securely. But as Marcus helped her with math problems and listened to her describe playground adventures, he felt the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing he was building something meaningful while protecting what mattered most. The investigation consumed the next 2 weeks like a slow-burning fire that touched every aspect of Morrison Digital's operations. FBI agents became permanent fixtures in the building, their presence transforming routine business meetings into carefully monitored discussions and turning casual conversations into potential security concerns. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, his technical expertise making him indispensable to unraveling the complex web of surveillance and infiltration that had compromised the company's most sensitive projects. Emma adapted to their new reality with the remarkable resilience that children often display when faced with circumstances beyond their understanding. The additional security measures became part of their routine: check-in calls every few hours, new protocols for walking to and from school, and the presence of discreet protective surveillance that Marcus hoped she wouldn't notice, but suspected she was too observant to miss entirely. "Dad," she said one evening as they sat at their kitchen table, her homework spread between them while he reviewed encrypted files on his laptop, "are we in danger? Or are we just being extra careful?" Marcus looked up from a forensic analysis report that detailed sophisticated malware designed to infiltrate power grid control systems. The question deserved an honest answer, even if the complete truth was too complex for an 8-year-old to fully comprehend. "We're being extra careful because some people are trying to do things that could hurt other people, and my job is to help stop them. The bad computer people?" "Something like that." Emma nodded with the matter-of-fact acceptance that had become her standard response to explanations about his work. "Are you good at stopping them?" "I'm learning to be." "Good, because I don't want the bad people to hurt anyone." The simplicity of her moral framework, bad people shouldn't hurt anyone and good people should stop them, provided clarity that cut through the complex geopolitical and technical considerations that dominated his professional discussions. Marcus kissed her forehead and returned to his analysis, carrying with him the reminder that beneath all the sophisticated cybersecurity threats and federal investigations, the fundamental goal remained protecting innocent people from those who would harm them. Victoria had thrown herself into the crisis with the same intensity she brought to all professional challenges, but Marcus had begun to notice signs of strain that suggested the pressure was affecting her more deeply than she admitted. She worked longer hours, took more calls from federal agents and concerned clients, and displayed the kind of controlled tension that spoke of someone carrying responsibilities that felt larger than any individual should bear alone. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon, when Marcus's analysis of network traffic patterns revealed something that had been hidden beneath layers of sophisticated misdirection and carefully constructed false evidence. He'd been tracing communication pathways used by the attackers when he noticed anomalies that didn't fit the established pattern of foreign intelligence operations. "Victoria, I need you to see this immediately," he called from his workstation, where multiple monitors displayed network diagrams and data flow analyses that painted a picture dramatically different from what they'd previously understood. Victoria appeared within minutes, followed by Agent Chen and 2 other FBI specialists who had become regular fixtures in Morrison Digital's Technical Operations Center. The urgency in Marcus's voice had been unmistakable, suggesting discoveries that could fundamentally alter their understanding of the threat they were facing. "What did you find?" Marcus activated the main display screen and began walking through his analysis, highlighting specific data points that revealed patterns invisible until examined from the right analytical perspective. "The attack patterns we've been analyzing don't match typical foreign intelligence operations. The technical signatures are wrong, the timing is inconsistent with overseas coordination, and the target selection doesn't align with strategic intelligence gathering." Agent Chen leaned forward, studying the technical evidence with the focused attention of someone who understood that investigative breakthroughs often emerged from details that seemed insignificant until viewed in proper context. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Chen?" "I'm suggesting that we've been looking for the wrong type of adversary. The sophisticated technical capabilities, the detailed knowledge of our operations, the precise timing of the attacks. These characteristics don't point to foreign intelligence services operating from overseas." Marcus pulled up communication logs and traced the pathways used by the attackers to access Morrison Digital systems. The attack infrastructure is distributed across multiple countries, which initially suggested international coordination. But when you analyze the actual data flows and timing patterns, everything routes back through servers and communication networks based in the United States. Victoria studied the network diagrams with growing understanding of the implications. Marcus was revealing. "You're saying the attacks originated domestically?" "More than that. I'm saying they originated from someone with intimate knowledge of US cybersecurity procedures, federal investigation protocols, and the specific technical measures that companies like Morrison Digital use to protect government contracts." Agent Chen requested access to Marcus's analysis files, immediately beginning her own review of the technical evidence while maintaining the careful expression that federal agents used when processing information that could dramatically alter ongoing investigations. "Mr. Chen, if your analysis is correct, we need to completely reassess our understanding of this threat. Foreign intelligence operations require different investigative approaches than domestic cybersecurity threats." Marcus pulled up additional evidence that had emerged from his expanded analysis of attack patterns and technical indicators. "Agent Chen, there's something else. The modified files that were stolen from our servers, the ones with false information, inserted about infrastructure security, those modifications weren't random or generic. They were specifically crafted to support attacks on the exact power grid systems and water treatment facilities that Morrison Digital has been contracted to assess." The conference room fell silent as the implications of this revelation settled over everyone present. If the stolen files had been modified to facilitate attacks on specific infrastructure targets, and those targets corresponded precisely to Morrison Digital's current government contracts, then the security breach wasn't just sophisticated espionage. It was preparation for coordinated strikes against systems that the company had been hired to protect. Victoria spoke first, her voice carefully controlled despite the obvious strain of processing these developments. "Marcus, are you suggesting that someone planned this attack specifically to obtain information about the infrastructure systems we've been securing?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting. And furthermore, I believe someone with access to our government contracts and project details provided intelligence to support the attack planning." Agent Chen activated secure communication equipment and began coordinating with other federal agencies, while Marcus continued his technical briefing. The possibility that domestic operatives had infiltrated critical infrastructure security programs required immediate escalation to national security agencies with broader investigative capabilities and enforcement authority. The expanded investigation that followed consumed the next week with the intensity of a major federal operation. Additional agents arrived from the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Agency, and the Department of Energy, transforming Morrison Digital's offices into a temporary command center for what had become a multi-agency cybersecurity investigation. Marcus found himself working 18-hour days, providing technical analysis and investigative support while maintaining the security protocols that protected Emma and ensured their family's safety. The work was exhausting but compelling, offering The kind of intellectual challenges and meaningful purpose that he'd never experienced during his years as an independent consultant. Victoria navigated the federal attention with the diplomatic skills that had built her company's reputation, but Marcus could see the toll that constant scrutiny and escalating responsibilities were taking on her usually unflappable composure. She managed client relationships while coordinating with federal investigators, maintained business operations while implementing enhanced security protocols, and provided leadership for her staff while dealing with threats that went far beyond normal corporate concerns. "How are you holding up?" Marcus asked one evening as they worked late in her office, reviewing technical evidence while federal agents conducted interviews and surveillance operations throughout the building. Victoria looked up from a classified briefing document, her expression mixing exhaustion with determination. "Some days I wonder what would have happened if I'd stuck to normal corporate consulting instead of taking on government contracts. You'd probably be making less money and dealing with fewer death threats." She laughed, a sound that carried more stress than humor. "When you put it that way, it's hard to argue with my life choices." Marcus studied her face, noting the signs of sustained pressure that even her professional composure couldn't entirely conceal. "Victoria, can I ask you something personal? After everything we've been through together, I think personal questions are probably overdue. Why did you really offer me this job? I mean the real reason, not the official explanation about technical expertise and infrastructure security." Victoria set down the briefing document and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that stretched toward Lake Michigan like a constellation fallen to Earth. "Do you want the professional answer or the honest answer?" "The honest answer. Because when I watched you work that first day, fixing my laptop and setting up backup systems, you approached the problem like someone who understood that technology failures affect real people in real ways. Most consultants I've worked with treat technical problems as abstract puzzles to be solved. You treated my crisis like something that mattered because it mattered to me." Marcus joined her at the window, both of them looking out at the city they were working to protect from threats that most people would never know existed. "And now I know I was right about your technical abilities and completely unprepared for everything else that came with hiring someone who actually cares about the work." "Meaning?" Victoria turned to face him directly, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal the person beneath the corporate executive facade. "Meaning that for 5 years, I've been building this company with the assumption that success required keeping everyone at arm's length. Clients, employees, federal agents, everyone was a professional relationship to be managed rather than a person to be trusted. And that's changed. Marcus, in the last 3 months, you've saved my company from a catastrophic data loss, helped prevent potential attacks on critical infrastructure, and somehow managed to do all of this while being a devoted father and a genuinely decent human being. That's changed my perspective on what's possible when you stop treating everything like a business transaction." The conversation was interrupted by Agent Chen's voice over the intercom system, requesting immediate attention for what she described as a significant development in the investigation. Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances that mixed anticipation with apprehension, both understanding that significant developments in federal cybersecurity investigations were rarely good news for the people involved. The briefing that followed revealed the results of the expanded investigation into domestic threats against critical infrastructure security programs. The evidence that Marcus had uncovered had led federal agents to identify a network of individuals within various government agencies and private companies who had been providing intelligence to support sophisticated attacks on power grid systems, water treatment facilities, and transportation networks. The operation was more extensive than we initially realized. Agent Chen explained, as she presented findings that painted a picture of coordinated infiltration spanning multiple states and numerous critical infrastructure targets. But Mr. Chen's analysis provided the breakthrough that allowed us to trace the network and identify the individuals responsible. The arrests had been coordinated across 6 states, targeting individuals who had used their legitimate access to government systems and private companies to gather intelligence for what appeared to be a domestic terrorist network planning attacks on regional infrastructure. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking in its ambition and terrifying in its potential consequences. Morrison Digital was targeted specifically because of your contracts with the Department of Energy and your reputation for thorough security assessments, Agent Chen continued. The attackers needed detailed information about infrastructure, vulnerabilities to plan effective strikes, and your company had access to exactly the kind of intelligence they required. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and lingering concern as he processed this information. Agent Chen, have all the threats been neutralized, or should we continue operating under enhanced security protocols? The immediate threats have been addressed, but investigations of this scope often reveal additional connections and participants. We recommend maintaining elevated security measures for the foreseeable future. Victoria spoke for the first time since the briefing began. What does this mean for Morrison Digital's government contracts and our ongoing projects? Your cooperation with this investigation has been exemplary, and your technical capabilities have proven essential to identifying and neutralizing serious threats to national security. I expect that your security clearances will be upgraded, and your company will be offered additional opportunities to support critical infrastructure protection efforts. The briefing concluded with discussions of ongoing security measures, testimony requirements for eventual prosecutions, and recognition procedures that would acknowledge Morrison Digital's contribution to preventing what could have been catastrophic attacks on civilian infrastructure. As federal agents began the process of transitioning from crisis response to normal investigative procedures, Marcus found himself reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed since that morning when he'd walked into Grind Coffee to fix Victoria Morrison's laptop. What had begun as a routine technical support call had evolved into involvement with national security threats, federal investigations, and the kind of meaningful work that could genuinely make differences in people's lives. Emma noticed the change in their routine when the constant security measures began to relax, and their apartment felt less like a safe house and more like a home again. Dad, are the bad computer people all caught now? Most of them. The people who know about these things are making sure the rest can't hurt anyone. So we're safe? Marcus looked at his daughter, thinking about the broader questions of safety and security that extended far beyond their personal circumstances. We're safer than we were before, and the work I'm doing helps make other people safer too. That's good. I like it when you do important things. The simplicity of her approval carried more weight than all the federal recognition and professional accolades that had accompanied his role in the investigation. Emma understood that important work was worth doing, even when it involved risks and complications that made life less predictable than either of them might prefer. Victoria had emerged from the federal investigation with her company's reputation enhanced and her professional prospects expanded in ways that exceeded her most ambitious projections. But Marcus noticed that her approach to business had shifted in subtle but significant ways, reflecting a perspective that valued long-term relationships over short-term gains and personal trust over purely transactional interactions. Marcus, I need to discuss something with you, she said one afternoon, as they reviewed proposals for new government contracts that reflected Morrison Digital's elevated security clearances and expanded capabilities. About the new contracts? About our partnership. These last few months have shown me that the best decisions I've made were the ones based on intuition rather than analysis. Hiring you, trusting you with sensitive information, working with you through this investigation, none of those decisions followed normal business protocols. Marcus looked up from the contract proposals, sensing that Victoria was approaching topics that went beyond professional considerations. And I want to formalize our partnership in ways that reflect the trust and collaboration that got us through this crisis. I'm offering you equity in Morrison Digital, along with expanded authority over technical operations and security planning. The offer was both generous and unexpected, representing the kind of professional opportunity that could provide long-term financial security while allowing him to continue work that felt genuinely meaningful. But Marcus had learned to consider all implications of major decisions, especially those that affected Emma's stability and their family's future. Victoria, that's an incredibly generous offer, but I need to ask about the personal implications of deeper partnership in a company that attracts federal attention and national security responsibilities. You mean the implications for Emma and your family life? Exactly. I've seen how this work can consume everything else, and I need to maintain the balance that allows me to be the father she needs. Victoria nodded with understanding that reflected her own experience, balancing professional ambitions with personal responsibilities. Marcus, I've spent 5 years building this company with the assumption that success required sacrificing everything else. But watching you navigate complex professional responsibilities while remaining a devoted father has shown me that balance isn't just possible. It's essential for sustained success. Meaning that I want to restructure Morrison Digital's operations to support the kind of work-life integration that allows people to do meaningful work without sacrificing their families or personal well-being. You've proven that it's possible to be both professionally excellent and personally grounded. The partnership agreement that emerged from their discussions represented more than just business arrangements and equity distributions. It reflected a shared commitment to building something that could provide security and opportunity while maintaining the values and relationships that gave work its ultimate meaning and purpose. Emma celebrated the partnership announcement with the enthusiasm of someone who understood that her father's professional success contributed to their family's security and opportunities. Does this mean you're going to be really important at work now? It means I'm going to help make decisions about how the company operates and what kind of work we take on. Will you still fix computers? Marcus laughed, remembering that first afternoon when his primary concern had been recovering Victoria's presentation files and setting up backup systems. I'll still fix computers when they need fixing, but now I'll also help prevent them from breaking in the first place. That's probably better. Prevention is usually easier than repair. The wisdom of her observation struck him with surprising force. Prevention was indeed easier than repair, whether applied to computer systems, infrastructure security, or the relationships and trust that made meaningful work possible. The partnership with Victoria had emerged from crisis, but it was grounded in the kind of mutual respect and shared values that could prevent future crises while building something lasting and worthwhile. 6 months later, Morrison Digital had grown to employ 68 people across expanded operations that included not just cybersecurity consulting, but also infrastructure resilience planning, threat intelligence analysis, and emergency response. Coordination. The company's reputation for handling sensitive projects with absolute discretion had attracted clients from government agencies, critical infrastructure operators, and international organizations that required the highest levels of technical expertise and security clearance. Marcus had found his role expanding beyond technical operations to include strategic planning, personnel development, and the kind of leadership responsibilities that he'd never imagined when he'd started his career as an independent consultant. But the work remained grounded in the same fundamental principles that had guided his approach to that first laptop repair, understanding that technology problems affected real people and that solutions needed to address human needs as much as technical requirements. Emma had adapted to their new circumstances with characteristic resilience, embracing opportunities that came with increased financial security while maintaining the independence and practical wisdom that had helped her navigate the challenges of single-parent family life. Her father's work had become a source of pride rather than concern, especially when she understood that his efforts contributed to protecting people and systems that made her world safer and more secure. Dad, do you like your job better now than when you used to fix computers in people's houses? The question came during one of their evening walks through the neighborhood, a routine they'd maintained despite all the changes in their professional and personal circumstances. Marcus considered the comparison between his current responsibilities and the simpler days when his biggest concern was recovering data from damaged hard drives. I liked helping people solve their problems then, and I like helping solve bigger problems now. The scale is different, but the satisfaction comes from the same thing, using skills to make things better for people who need help. And you get to work with Ms. Morrison, who's really smart and likes you. Marcus smiled at his daughter's perceptive observation about the partnership that had become the foundation of both his professional success and personal fulfillment. Yes, I get to work with someone who's really smart and who I respect and trust completely. Are you going to marry her? The directness of Emma's question caught him off guard, though he probably should have anticipated that an 8-year-old would eventually notice the obvious affection and partnership that had developed between him and Victoria over months of crisis management and shared responsibilities. What makes you ask that? Because you smile differently when you talk about her than when you talk about other work people, and she looks at you the way Mom used to look at you in the pictures. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion as Emma's observation connected, his present happiness with memories of Sarah and the love they'd shared before illness took her away. The idea that Victoria might look at him with something approaching the affection Sarah had felt was both thrilling and terrifying. Relationships are complicated, especially when they involve work and family and all the responsibilities that come with being adults. But you like her, right? Like really like her? Yes, I really like her. And she likes you? I think so. Emma nodded with the satisfaction of someone who'd confirmed important information. Then you should probably tell her that. Because good things shouldn't be kept secret when they could make people happy. The wisdom of her advice stayed with Marcus as they completed their walk and settled into their evening routine of homework assistance and bedtime stories. Emma's practical approach to emotional decisions, good things that could make people happy shouldn't be kept secret, offered clarity that cut through the complex considerations that had prevented him from acknowledging what had become increasingly obvious to everyone around them. Victoria had indeed become more than a business partner and professional colleague. Somewhere between crisis management and strategic planning, between federal investigations and infrastructure security projects, they developed the kind of partnership that extended beyond professional boundaries into genuine affection and mutual support. The conversation finally happened on a Friday evening as they finished reviewing quarterly business reports and began transitioning from professional discussions to the more personal topics that had become natural parts of their extended work. In sessions, "Victoria, can I ask you something that isn't about business?" She looked up from financial projections with an expression that suggested she'd been expecting this moment for some time. "I think personal questions are overdue at this point. Emma asked me tonight if I was going to marry you." Victoria's composure faltered slightly, replaced by something warmer and more vulnerable than her usual professional demeanor. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that relationships are complicated, but she pointed out that good things shouldn't be kept secret when they could make people happy. She's a wise young woman. She gets that from her mother, but her practical approach to problems comes from having to adapt to whatever life brings her way." Victoria set aside the financial reports and moved to the window where they'd had so many important conversations over the months of their partnership. "Marcus, these last 6 months have changed my perspective on what's possible when you stop treating everything like a business transaction." "How so?" "I built Morrison Digital with the assumption that professional success required keeping personal feelings separate from business decisions. But working with you, navigating crises together, building something meaningful while maintaining our individual priorities, that's shown me that the best partnerships integrate all aspects of who we are." Marcus joined her at the window, both of them looking out at the city that had become the backdrop for their shared work and growing relationship. "And where does that leave us?" Victoria turned to face him directly, her expression open and honest in ways that her professional role rarely allowed. "It leaves us wherever we want to be, as long as we're honest about what we want and willing to build something together." "And what do you want?" "I want to continue building Morrison Digital with someone I trust completely. I want to support your relationship with Emma and be part of a family that makes room for meaningful work and genuine affection. I want to see what's possible when two people stop analyzing every decision and start trusting their instincts about what could make them happy." Marcus felt the same clarity that had guided his decision to accept Victoria's original job offer, the recognition that some opportunities were worth accepting despite their complexity and uncertainty. "Emma thinks I should tell you that I really like you, really like you." Victoria's laugh carried genuine joy rather than nervous tension. "And what do you think?" "I think Emma's advice is usually worth following." The kiss that followed felt like the natural conclusion to months of partnership, crisis management, and growing affection that had developed alongside their professional collaboration. It represented not just personal attraction, but the recognition that their best work emerged from trust, respect, and the kind of mutual support that made difficult challenges manageable and meaningful success possible. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony that reflected their shared preference for substance over spectacle. Emma served as maid of honor, declaring the wedding officially approved because Victoria had promised to help with math, homework, and had demonstrated excellent judgment in recognizing how awesome her father was. Morrison Digital continued to grow and evolve, taking on increasingly complex projects that utilized the specialized expertise and security clearances that had emerged from their role in preventing infrastructure attacks. But the company's success remained grounded in the same principles that had guided that first laptop repair, understanding that technology problems affected real people and that the best solutions addressed human needs as much as technical requirements. Marcus found that marriage and expanded family responsibilities enhanced rather than complicated his professional effectiveness. Victoria's business acumen complemented his technical expertise, while Emma's practical wisdom often provided insights that cut through complex strategic considerations. Their partnership had created something larger and more meaningful than any of them could have achieved individually. The story had begun with a broken laptop and a single father looking for stable employment that could support his family while utilizing his skills meaningfully. It had evolved into a partnership that prevented attacks on critical infrastructure, built a company that balanced profit with purpose, and created a family that demonstrated how professional success and personal fulfillment could reinforce rather than compete with each other. Sometimes the most important repairs aren't to machines, but to the assumptions we make about what's possible when we're willing to trust ourselves and each other enough to build something lasting and worthwhile. Marcus Chen had walked into Grind Coffee that Tuesday morning, expecting to fix a laptop. Instead, he discovered that some problems worth solving require not just technical expertise, but the courage to risk everything on the possibility that the right partnership can make extraordinary things possible. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.